Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Today I am going to be unboxing and reviewing Fantasy Series 1. This is a range of PVC 28mm miniatures from Blacklist Miniatures, which is a division of Blacklist Games spearheaded by the Sadler brothers, who are very good game designers. This is a set of miniatures that was crowdfunded on Kickstarter. The campaign was launched in 2020 and rewards started going out to backers in 2021. And the original buy-in was $65 for 70 plastic miniatures. However, being Kickstarter, there were stretch goals, and by the end of the campaign, people who backed were getting over 200 miniatures for their $65, which was an absolute steal. Of course, I did not back this on Kickstarter. This was actually a gift from my wife, who purchased it online. A number of people were buying multiple sets of this because it was such good value, and I think there was even a retailer pledge where you could get something like 6 sets for $250, and that meant a lot of these sets were going onto the secondary market after the campaign. Obviously, the price significantly higher than was paid during the campaign, but my wife still managed to get a complete pledge, that's over 200 miniatures, for £95 postage free. That works out to less than 50p per miniature, and there are some massive miniatures in this set. And not just massive miniatures, but really useful, interesting miniatures that are surprisingly well cast and designed. Of course, you are not going to be getting Games Workshop quality at this scale, at this price point, but I consider this to be a fantastic set of miniatures. Some of them really excellent, and all of them worthy of putting some paint on. And while some of these miniatures are designed for use with Alter Quest, and even in the Kickstarter stretch goals there was a set of cards that allowed you to use some of these miniatures in Alter Quest, this is really just a big box, or in fact 2 big boxes, of pretty generic miniatures that are going to be really useful for things like Dungeons & Dragons. My wife initially purchased this for me because she knows that I'm always looking for miniatures for Dungeons & Dragons and also ranges of Shadow Deep. But that's enough of that, let's take a look inside this box. First of all, it is just worth mentioning that all of the miniatures come in vacuum molded trays, and these trays do not grip the miniatures tightly. There are plastic lids that go over the top, but there's nothing here that's going to cause stress or pressure on any of the miniatures as you're taking them out, so you should in fact be able to paint these miniatures and return them to their original tray if you so wish. And the actual Fantasy Series 1 box comprises 70 miniatures in 2 trays like this. And you will notice that the minion level monsters come in sets of 5. So there are 5 green oozes in translucent green plastic, and 5 kobolds, 5 imps, 5 spiders. You can't have a set of fantasy miniatures without some giant spiders, although to be honest, I did think they were like giant ticks or bugs or something when I first saw them. 5 worms, these are really excellent. 5 giant rats, and I like these a lot because they are even bigger than your average giant rats. These are indeed rodents of unusual size. And then you have a set of 5 troglodytes, which look like they could very easily stand in for abominations in Hasbro's version of HeroQuest. And while we're mentioning HeroQuest, I should say at this point these are PVC miniatures, but they do not have the flex that the new HeroQuest miniatures have, or the miniatures in something like the Dungeons & Dragons Castle Ravenloft board game. These are much more rigid than that. There is a little bit of flex to them, but these are much more robust, solid miniatures. On the second tray, you get a set of 5 skeletons, and I would say these are probably the weakest sculpts in the set, just because I don't really particularly like this style. They look a bit too cartoony compared to the other stuff. 5 gnolls, and I love these. I love them in particular because I do not have any gnoll miniatures at the moment, so I'm glad to have a set of them. I wish they had included some gnoll archers as well, because that would be useful for me in ranges of Shadow Deep, but at least I have some gnolls. There is a set of 5 zombies, and I don't know what it is about fantasy zombies, but no company seems to be able to make fantasy zombies that I really like. I'm not a fan of these. I wasn't a fan of the zombies from Cursed City. I wasn't a fan of the zombies in the new edition of HeroQuest. I don't know what it is, I'm just really struggling to find zombies that I absolutely love. Maybe it's just because I love the original HeroQuest zombies so much. You then get 5 orcs, and these are really good orcs. They look like Dungeons & Dragons orcs. You will see that the axe here is bent. This is one of the thinner elements on one of the miniatures, and a little bit of hot water will straighten that out, no problem at all. And then you get a set of 5 goblins with evil scimitars and short bows on their back. And again, these look like they would fit in with other Dungeons and Dragons type goblins. There are also 10 heroes in the set. I'm not going to show them all to you, but this one is probably my favourite from the 10. It's a half-orc ranger. And for the sake of brevity, here are all 10 of the heroes in their little recesses. Some really nice stuff here. So that was the core box, that was the core offering, but then there were the stretch goals, and this is ridiculous. This box is twice the size of the Fantasy Series 1 box. We will take a quick look in here as well. I particularly want to show you all of the massive scale miniatures in here. And in this box you're getting 2 trays of the smaller miniatures and then 1 tray with the big miniatures, and there's some more really good stuff in here. We've got werewolves, we've got, I think they're bandits, we have wolves, harpies, bugbears, spirits in translucent blue, ghouls at the bottom, and then we also have a massive selection of heroes and NPCs. Just loads and loads of really interesting stuff. This is one of my favourite miniatures from that tray. I am really pleased to have a really nice tavern owner miniature. This character is going to play a big role in my forthcoming Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And I love this miniature too. We have a bard with his tankard of ale, looking dashing and debonair. There is even a street merchant selling her wares. This sort of thing is great for a DM. This sort of thing is always useful. And it is worth saying again, you are not getting Games Workshop quality here. You are never going to get Games Workshop quality for the price of these miniatures, but they are still really nicely done. I think they have lots of character, they have really interesting poses, and they still have good detailing. There's also not a huge amount of really nasty mold lines or anything to clean up. I think they're cast very nicely, some better than others as you would expect, but these are going to paint up pretty quickly, pretty easily, and should look really nice on the tabletop. And another thing that I think is important to note, they have not gone down the route of putting spell effects on the miniatures. That's something that you get in the Dungeons and Dragons line, and I am not a big fan of it. I like this here, where you can see that his hands are positioned as though he is going to summon some kind of magical spell, probably a fireball. His cape is flailing in the wind, but there isn't a horrible piece of translucent plastic wedged in there that you have to worry about painting. Oh, and I couldn't resist a close-up of one of the 5 werewolves. I love horror and I love werewolves. They are one of my favourite mythical creatures. I'm very happy to have another 5 to add to my growing pack. On the second small tray we have more sets of 5 enemies. We've got some kind of dread knight here, cultists, mummies, not very good mummies I would say, some really nice mechanical constructs, some banshees of some kind, some small gargoyles. Gargoyles are often depicted as being quite large, but these are some smaller ones, which is really interesting, and then some kind of ghostly or gas-like snake, and then we have boars over here, and giant bugs, and yet more heroes and NPCs. I do like these piggies. I think these are really nice. And the beetles are suitably creepy. In terms of the NPCs and heroes in this tray, I think my favourite is this one. Some kind of law enforcement officer. And there is a very cool, chunky half-orc paladin. And finally, I'll show you this one because I really like the stance on this one. Sort of a bit of trepidation going into a dungeon somewhere. I don't know why, but I just really like that pose. Nice and simple, but it's like it's telling a little story in its own right. We are almost done, but I wanted to show you each of the bigger miniatures because they are great. This is a great big dire bear. We will hold him up to a human character for comparison purposes. The fire elemental, which may not come out that well on camera because of the plastic that it's made from. And again, here is our wizard for scale. A water elemental. This one is really nice. And here he is for scale. These are, by the way, the smallest of the big miniatures. An air elemental. Very interesting sculpt. I feel this poor wizard is in a lot of trouble if he's meeting all of these at once. And this one I absolutely love. This is an earth elemental or a shambling mound or something like that. Has a toadstool up on top of his back. A suitably chunky threat. Actually, I suppose this may be an earth elemental or a stone golem or something like that. Really nicely put together. And again, a sizable chunk of plastic. We have a Naga, and this is probably, for me at least, the weakest of the large miniatures. I just think it's not a very interesting sculpt, and there's a lot of textures missing, I would say, from the body. But suitably terrifying to meet in a dungeon. Then there is a troll. This is a really nice miniature, but I'm not really sure about the posing of it. I think the posing is a little bit weird. But here's our wizard for scale again. We then have a really chunky ogre, and I think this could be one of my favourite miniatures from the entire set. It's so nice. I love his big mace, and his stroppy face, and the way he is wagging his finger as if to say, "You better leave that treasure chest alone, sonny," which our wizard would probably be wise to do. And then we have another standout from the set. This miniature is lovely. I really, really like it. I love the sword. It is very flamboyant and over the top, as you would expect for a demon prince. And he is holding the head of the previous demon prince in his hand, by the looks of it. But really nice. Lovely wings. Nice outstretched pose. Lots of detail and character. I love the facial expression. And he is a very chunky lad. Then there is a giant, and this really is a giant. This is huge. Not the most interesting sculpt, but you can't complain, because sometimes, especially when it comes to giants, size really does matter. But of course, no fantasy miniature set is complete without at least one dragon, and this one is a doozy. This is a really, really nice dragon. I think this is a fantastic chunk of plastic. Very heavy, very robust, nicely sculpted, nice detailing on the scales and the wings, and flipping huge. So there you have it. That is a full pledge for Fantasy Series 1 from Blacklist Miniatures, which my wife purchased for £95, postage included, and I think that is an absolute steal for all of this. This is just an incredible selection of miniatures. Miniatures that are nicely sculpted enough that you'll be able to paint them, but not so fussy that it's going to take you ages. Nicely varied, and yet generic enough that you're going to be able to port them into all sorts of role-playing games. Obviously, Dungeons & Dragons is the big one that springs to mind, but these are going to turn up in my Rangers of Shadow Deep games, they're going to turn up in my Dungeon Universalis games, they're going to turn up in any other miniatures agnostic game I can think I would like to play. As I mentioned before, there were a lot of sets of these sold during the campaign, and there are many on the secondary market. Shop around, you should be able to get a decent price. And also be aware that in 2021, when Blacklist Games kickstarted Lasting Tales, they simultaneously kickstarted Fantasy Series 2, another 218 PVC miniatures. So that's something else to look out for in the future. But I think I've been talking for long enough for now, so that is about it from me. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you've really enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.